Chandrasekhar.
Sir Rajiv Chandrasekhar.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir, for giving me this opportunity to speak in this debate about the pandemic. Sir, at the outset, I would like to thank the Chairman and the Honourable Speaker of the Lok Sabha for the efforts in making this Parliament session safer for us to do our duty as parliamentarians, and I thank you, sir. Sir, let me first draw the attention of the House and indeed all those who are watching today, sir, through you, that the COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented event in the history of the world. The world has not experienced anything like this since the Spanish flu of 1918. And while there are very many senior members in this House, I suspect none of us have experienced or have any knowledge or memories of the Spanish flu. Sir, this virus originated in China, of which there is no doubt. The bizarre conduct of the Chinese government for the most of 2020 confirms that. The Chinese government response is that it originated from a wet market in Wuhan from some bats. But there are other reports that contradict that, sir, and there is growing evidence that this COVID-19 virus may have been a deliberate man-made laboratory creation in one of the Chinese PLA labs. A revelation most recently by a Dr. Li Mengyang, who has recently fled to the US. Sir, there is no vaccine against this virus currently, so it is safe to assume that the world remains vulnerable for the coming near term. The impact of the pandemic shock is already playing out. Lives have been lost, businesses and job losses, and livelihood declines all around us. Unfortunately, sir, it is the weakest and the most vulnerable who are bearing the brunt of the virus as panic and income losses combine to drive millions home in trying and difficult conditions. Sir, notwithstanding the views of the wise men and women in our opposition parties who have become experts in hindsight, the truth, sir, is that the world was flying blind about this pandemic, especially in its early stages. And even today, sir, as the vaccine remains elusive, people remain at risk. Governments around the world, as in India, sir, have a tough choice between protecting health and lives versus livelihoods. It is a choice that has been forced on governments never before in the modern age, and governments, including ours, are being forced to take. Sir, I accept that the people of India are entitled to and expect a report card from their government. Did we do enough? Did we act in time? Did we put in necessary efforts? Can people restart their lives as before? What does the future hold? These are all legitimate questions, sir, for which the opposition and the government should unite and find answers and solutions, instead of what we see today, carping and petty criticism. Sir, the pandemic was an unknown to the world. Its rapid spread, its virality, lack of vaccine and cures have posed a challenge not just to India, it has brought bigger and more prosperous nations and healthcare systems to their knees. So the enormity of the challenge that our government faced must be understood. And the fact that after 75 years, our healthcare system has been underinvested in, and many states were incapable of handling this crisis in early March and April, must be recognized. So I do hope, sir, that the people of India become more aware and more informed as a result of these debates, notwithstanding the petty political criticism and bland sarcasm from the opposition instead of ideas and solutions. And Derek, you know who I mean. Sir, there is some reference to chronology, sir. And I just want to briefly touch on some issues of chronology to make a very important point. The virus started in November 2019 in Wuhan. The Chinese authorities reported it to the WHO only in December 31 after a full 1.5 months for this to have an unfettered spread. From there on, it spread. And I want to make this point, sir. Within different countries, the virus spread through the population at varying speeds depending on a range of factors, such as cultural and behavioral responses of the community, population density, average household size, among others. These differences have driven the nature of spreads in each country with substantial variations, also depending on the responses of this country. I make this point, sir, to make the point that it's very, very difficult to compare the spread of the disease in one country to the other because of the underlying sociological and economic factors. Sir, I want to talk broadly about two broad issues, sir, about some criticisms that have been raised. One is about the need for the lockdown, and the second briefly to touch on the economy, sir. Sir, there are some that are questioning whether there should have been a lockdown, and again I refer to this wisdom of hindsight. It's a very easy quality to develop. When tackling a virulent virus like COVID-19, early interventions are crucial to stay ahead of the disease. It is important to note, sir, that in almost all countries, the ones that were successful had the strictest intervention like lockdown at the early dates versus those who had just advisories. Sir, the lockdown was necessary, unambiguously necessary, to slow the spread of the disease and to create time for the governments, both central and state, to build up healthcare capacity, capability, and increase citizen awareness. Sir, these were critical, and it turns out now that this precious time, when used properly, has significantly expanded testing capacities in the country, lowered fatality rates, and increased recovery rates. Sir, my colleague, the Trinamool MP, spoke about a nuanced lockdown, as if it is some new invention in Kolkata. Sir, no lockdown anywhere in this country has been total. Even when there was a total lockdown, the economic activity of 40 to 45% under the essential services remain intact. So there is no such thing as a total lockdown anywhere in the country. So there is no nuance in Kolkata that does not apply anywhere in the world, in the country. Sir, and I draw the attention to the critics of the lockdown to this one statement by the Congress President Sonia Gandhi on April 2nd, and I quote, "The lockdown may have been necessary, but not well planned." That is her quote. So, sir, I accept that in this country, there may be people with better ideas, better brains, and I'm even willing to accept that some of them are in the Congress. But I saw no evidence at all from April 2nd to today of a better plan, even in Congress-governed states like Maharashtra. So I will, as will people of India, take this criticism for what it is. Criticism for the sake of it.
You are going on party line.
Please, please,
No,
please.
this is not good, sir.
Indeed, sir.
We all decided here.
Yes, I think we all should follow that norms. It's a good suggestion, but we all should follow that norms. Please, please,
Garge ji, I am responding to...
please,
No,
please, please speak to the chair, Mr. Chandrasekhar.
Sir, I will end by just reminding my colleagues in the opposition, sir, that after the lockdown was imposed, the United Nations praised India's response to the pandemic as comprehensive and robust, terming the lockdown restrictions as aggressive but vital. The Oxford Government Response Tracker noted the government's swift and contingent actions, emergency policy making, emergency investment in healthcare, fiscal stimulus and investment in vaccine and R&D, and gave India a score of 100 for the strict response. Sir, my colleague Sudhanshu ji has already spoken about how the government used this opportunity of the lockdown to do an unprecedented expansion of healthcare capacity in the country. Unprecedented since independence, that we have expanded our testing, vaccine capacity, R&D capacities at this level in just 100 days. So I will not mention that anymore, sir. I will end by saying this on this issue of lockdown, sir, that the lockdown has been vindicated by the expanding testing capacities, low fatality rates, and high recovery rates. And I say this, sir, with all responsibility. Lockdowns are a necessary tool in the toolkits of responsible governments, which need to be used sparingly because of its high cost, but will be around as a contingency plan as long as the vaccine remains elusive. Sir, I want to talk a little bit about the economy, sir. There have been comments about the economy and the handling of the economy. Sir, we are in the midst of the biggest economic crisis the world has ever seen. This pandemic has devastated economies around the world and global trade. Very soon after the pandemic started, 65% of the global trade was impacted, and the economies of the world's largest consuming and investing economies were hit hard. Sir, the Indian economy depends on manufacturing, service sector, exports, and foreign investment. And all of those four pillars on which the Indian economy rests were hit hard. The economic impact was wide as well as deep. And sir, it is clear from the get-go that conventional economic thinking and theories had no solution for this type of crisis. So the priority of the government was to ensure a soft landing of the economy and livelihoods during the inevitable contraction. Soft landing of the economy was to ensure minimum damage to the real economy. Sir, to this end, the government moved decisively, comprehensively. It announced moratoriums on tax payments, GST payments, and loans, provided indirect income support to small businesses through PF contributions, expanded the definition of MSMEs, provided liquidity support to the MSMEs, direct debit transfers, and expanded Manrega for the poor. Significant financial support from the government was directed at the most vulnerable parts of our economy, the MSMEs and the poor. The decisions taken, and this, sir, I want the House to recognize, decisions taken by our Honorable Prime Minister in his first term, like the JDY, the direct benefit transfer, cleaning up of the financial sector, have been very important and have played the role of a bulwark in this crisis. For example, sir, our financial sector is cleaner and qualitatively in much better shape than it has ever been in 2004. It is to the credit of this government that the financial sector, rebuilt since the dark days of 2014, has become a significant strength to the government and the economy. When liquidity in excess of 10 lakh crores, the financial sector has served as a bulwark against the economic losses due to the pandemic. So it is indeed ironic when former UPA constituents or ministers wax eloquent about the economy today, sir, because they need to be reminded, and I do this respectfully, sir, to you, again and again, about the sorry state of the economy and financial sector left behind in 2014. Sir, the increased delivery of credit to small businesses and to the government for its increased spending on the rural and the poor and the unprecedented expansion of healthcare by the government and to meet deficits in tax and GST revenue was only possible because of the strength of our financial sector. The banking system has alone delivered 2 lakh crores during the lockdown in additional credit to the MSMEs during this period. Our markets have remained stable and functional. Yields on long-term bonds have remained stable. The RBI has been proactive with its repos and LTROs to keep yields down and currency stable. So that soft landing was the first step which the government managed successfully. The next step was to reboot and restart. So at this stage, sir, a lot of members have raised this issue of the minus 23.9 for the Q1. And I want to squarely take this on, sir, because it's even ironical that my colleagues on the left are suddenly obsessed with the GDP and the numbers that the GDP is throwing up. I think most have jumped into this eagerly thinking it's a piece of bad news that they can target the government with. The facts are this, sir. Every major economy in the world has taken a deep hit April to June. Different countries at different levels of lockdown, different levels of economic activity and stimulus. Countries like the US, who use printing of the US dollar as stimulus, had massive stimulus packages of trillions of dollars and a mixed lockdown. Countries like UK were minus 20% for the quarter. Japan was minus 8 for the quarter, annualized at minus 27.8. Germany was minus 11.7. The point is, sir, not to throw numbers around. These numbers are not comparable with each other because of the different natures of each economy and the different types of lockdown adopted by each. As I mentioned earlier, sir, the lockdown was necessary to slow the disease. India was locked down for most of April and May. The lockdown for most of April and May, and then in parts of June and July. This meant, sir, just simple mathematics for anybody who really wants to understand, sir, that 60% of our economy was shut down for 2 months or 8 weeks. Imagine that, sir. When 60% of our economy at 20 lakh crores of GDP per month were locked down, the impact was expected. This means, sir, our economy could have contracted up to minus 40% for that first quarter. But the fact that it was only minus 23.9 was a result of the many directed packages to MSMEs and other parts of the economy from the government. So that is good news. Now, those in the opposition that are focusing on this number, sir, leave out the rest of the story very conveniently. Our economy has bounced back to 85% of its pre-COVID levels in June itself, and then remained at that level in July and most of August, despite lockdowns in Bengaluru and Mumbai in July. Post-May, sir, the unlocking process has proceeded upwards for the economy. The economy has revived in a V-shaped curve from being at 40% of pre-COVID levels in May to 85% in June and about 90% in August. The GDP for April-June quarter may be about -6, and this quarter about -1 to -2, and Q3 and Q4 being stronger quarters as the economy builds back. Sir, I am not a predictor or an astrologer, but we can, I believe, expect a possible overall GDP contraction for the year at a range of -6 to -10%, depending on the second half of this year. So the question remains, and this is a good thing for this House to be aware of and discuss. What is the implication of this kind of economic contraction of -6 to -10%? So simply put, and this is an important thing for us to understand, this is a one-time loss to the country, similar to the ones that states suffer during a natural calamity like floods and droughts. There is no cause for it that is in our control as government or citizens. The difference is this, sir, that when states have losses due to floods and droughts, the center steps in. But this loss is for the entire country, and the whole country needs to bear this. There is no one else to forward these losses to. There is nobody else, unless maybe China accepts their responsibility and there is a case for reparations. This needs to be understood, especially, sir, with those opposition states that keep talking about GST shortfalls. And I don't want to get into that controversy, but I will ask the opposition members a simple question. If there was no GST today, wouldn't their revenues as states have taken a hit in the event of the COVID-19 pandemic? So, sir, there is no one to pass this bill to. The economic losses due to this pandemic is the country's loss and will have to be shared. Sir, some colleagues have commented on the inadequacy of the 20 lakh crore Atmanirbhar package, and I will just, this is an important point, so I will say this and then I'll conclude, sir. It is not big, it's not comparable, it's not big enough compared to the US. These are many comments on this, sir. But I would respectfully submit for the understanding of our members, this government's approach to this economic crisis is not to make wild, rash economic decisions to get a few headlines like we saw in 2008. The country and its citizens paid a huge price for the recklessness of 2008 and the fiscal profligacy of the then government that broke our financial sector. The Narendra Modi government's approach is careful, calibrated, and medium term. You may well ask, why medium term? Why not do everything today? The problem is today, why not do everything today? The answer is simple, sir. As long as the vaccine is not around, the pandemic remains a clear and present danger to the economy. The only real guarantor of our economy is a strong government with strong financial options. This needs to be understood. The government financial options must remain intact for as long as the pandemic remains. It has to be, the government's response has to be a continuing one, and giving the government the capacity to intervene in the future also. So, sir, the government's response has been exactly right. It has been responsive. It has been calibrated. It knows it has to play the long game as the most important player of the economy. Conventional economic theories simply don't work in today's crisis. The economy has soft-landed. Economic activity is slowly and surely building up. MSMEs are being credit supported. Non-MSME businesses have been given time through restructuring to rebuild vis-a-vis the bankers. This issue of demand and consumer confidence, sir, I would respectfully submit to those who want to understand, is not linked to a stimulus as much as it is linked to confidence about the pandemic. The people of India know who did what during this crisis, sir, and how a partnership of central government, state governments, COVID warriors, and a billion Indians rose together to fight this pandemic. Sir, I will end with an optimistic note about the future, sir. Assuming that an expectation of a vaccine that will be realized soon is true, India has an unprecedented opportunity. to capitalize on the growing revulsion and distrust about China and the irreversible trend of diversification of China-based supply chains. The changing world order sees India as a nation that represents trust and strength. The national infrastructure pipeline will kick off a major investment drive as things return to normal. Our Prime Minister has seen this opportunity as the future beyond these difficult times and presented his vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat as the future of New India. So, sir, regardless of this deep shock and disruptions in our lives and livelihoods, we must keep the faith. We must be united. We must be confident that we will prevail, grow, and thrive. I end, sir, with my salutes to the men and women around the country battling this coronavirus to keep us safe from the China virus, and to the brave men and women of our armed forces and paramilitary forces at the LAC protecting our national integrity and sovereignty from the expansionism of China. Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
धन्यवाद. Message from Lok Sabha, Secretary General.
Sir, with your kind permission, I rise to report that Lok Sabha at sitting held on 16 September 2020 passed the Banking Regulation Amendment Bill 2020. I lay a copy of the bill on the table.
धन्यवाद. Honorable Ramdas Athawale ji.